This is the Believe in Texans podcast alongside former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran Cecil Stroud III. I am Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home for the Houston Texans. And Cecil, after starting the gauntlet 1-0, Texans then proceeded to finish the gauntlet 1-2, and not just lose the final game of that gauntlet, but lose in incredibly embarrassing fashion to the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson now 5-0 against the Houston Texans, and not one of those games has been close. And the Texans basically get their lunch stolen from them, 31-2, in the game where the only points they got obviously came from the defense. And now they finish the season against the fake Oilers in a game where, according to head coach DeMeco Ryans, he's kind of non-committal on how much starters will play, how long they'll play. I feel like the expectation maybe should be they'll play a half. What's your gut read on how long the starters will play for the Houston Texans this week against the Tennessee fake Oilers?
I'll probably say a quarter.
Not even a half.
I don't think a half. I just think he wants to see some decent football from his starters, and then he'll take it out. Take everybody out. He definitely said everybody's going to play. So I think half at best, like half at like most, I should say. But I wouldn't be surprised if you take him out after a quarter. I mean, I get it from a standpoint of you've already locked up the 4 seed. You can't get any higher. You can't get any lower. Why risk injury and try to get as healthy as you can to do your best against, I believe it'll be Pittsburgh or whoever else. Could be Baltimore, could be Los Angeles Chargers. I don't know. I think it's Pittsburgh event that's the most likely scenario. So, yeah, I think a quarter, but I'd be surprised if they play more than a half.
Cecil, there's a person on this show who has a reputation maybe for being a loudmouth, and it's obviously not you. But somebody on this show has a reputation of being a bit of a loudmouth and being a little brash with the with the takes and whatnot. And one of those takes that I had about 8 weeks ago was that Texas needed to fire Bobby Slowick. And we talked about going into the bye week and coming out into the gauntlet. They had 2 weeks to fix the offense. See, so the offense looks worse than it's ever looked. What am I guess for you, do you have any expectation of what this offense will look like either this week against Tennessee or into the postseason? Because let me give you an idea of how bad this offense, how much this offense has underachieved this year. Right now, the Houston Texans are 20th in yards per game, 316.3 yards per game. Last year, CJ Stroud passed for 273.9 yards per game. So they're averaging 316 as a total offense when they averaged 274 just in the passing game a year ago. And they somehow have not been able to fix any of this going on 3 months. What should be the expectation for this offense going forward that wasn't great against Miami, needed the defense to get them short fields against Kansas City, and basically went backwards against the Baltimore Ravens?
I think what we've seen in the last 3 months is what we'll get. The expectation is it'll be a bad offense. I don't see anything changing. I haven't seen any improvements in the run game, in the pass game. I think CJ is battling some injuries. He doesn't look the same at all. You reshuffled your offensive line because of injuries. That hasn't helped at all. Like, it's nothing you have done. Your play calling is still predictable. You are not making the proper adjustments, in-game adjustments, halftime adjustments. It's just not working out. So the last 3-4 months, whatever we've seen as far as the offensive side, we're going to continue to see the next 2 or 3 weeks. I just don't expect much change. The only way you'll win and go deep in the playoffs if your defense does the work it's been doing for you. right? The defense is putting you in situations to succeed. Matter of fact, the defense even scored 2 points for you last week. Like, I mean, the defense is what's holding this team together right now, right? So I don't expect much from the offense. I think the defense will play well. I love Aziz coming back with Harris and Tuatuo or Toatoa and those guys, and the defense should be firing pretty good. But I just don't think that would be enough to help change anything on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, there was times where you get the ball in short field and you do nothing. There's times you get the ball in the short field and you don't score in the red zone. You're getting the ball in the 20 in the red zone and you're not scoring touchdowns. You're not getting the ball to your best player. You're not finding ways to get guys open. You're not finding ways to help your quarterback be successful, whatever the case may be. And I don't know who fault it is, but on offense, you stink right now. That's just what it is. You are trash. So in my opinion, I'm not going to expect anything else but trash. That's just what you've been giving me the last 2 or 3 months. That's what I expect going into the next 2 or 3 weeks.
After last season, I think we all felt that CJ Stroud was on the path to being a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. To this point this year, is there anything to make you change your mind on that?
On that trajectory?
Yes.
You know what? Looking back, I do not change what I think. I still think he can be a top 5 quarterback. I think it needs to happen under a new play caller. I do. I think if you bring Bobby back, I think he'll have the same struggles he had this year. But if you can bring somebody in and you got to reshuffle the offensive line, I'm gonna be very upfront with you, Pat. I'm already thinking about the offseason. I'm already thinking about how can you improve, and I'm be honest with you. Like, it's nobody besides Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, and CJ Stroud that I am not willing to part ways with on that offense. I'm willing to get rid of everybody else on that offense. That's just what it is. Because I feel like what I've seen on film, what I've seen schematically, it's just not it. It's just not it. So, and that includes Tunsil, that includes Titus Howard. Those guys to me have not lived up to what they should be doing. Your quarterback is one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. And what do they play? They play offensive line. So, in my opinion, if the offensive line is giving up one of the most sacks in the league, then we got to figure something else out. And I'm not sure how that looks, what that looks like, but it's just hard. I'm just looking towards the offseason. Tank Dell's injury, it scares me. That's the exact same injury that ruined my career. That the doctors told me I would never play again. That I was in the hospital for 2 weeks in California because they were worried about my arteries. Like that's the only difference is I tore my PCL. I tore almost basically everything in it. I still think he got some strands hanging in there somewhere. But I'm worried for him because that's a long process. Like, I got hurt in 2016, December 4th. I didn't get cleared till like 2021, 2022. Now I was older. I was later in my 20s. I was 29-ish, something like that. I wasn't, after they told me everything was pretty much gone, I'm like, I'm not working as hard to come back like I'm trying to play. I'm just trying to be a healthy man. If that makes sense? So a different mindset, right? But that's a injury that he's not going to come back next year. I'll be very surprised. I hope I'm wrong that he comes back next year. So looking at the offense, I'm like, yo, some change needs to happen. Like, some change really needs to happen. So yes, to answer your question, I think I went haywire. To answer your question, yes, I do think he's still a top 5. It's just going to take a little bit longer than what I thought to get there.
Are you surprised that there has been so much regression in year 2? Not just CJ, the whole offense, the blocking scheme, the offensive line, that's worse with their starters this year than they were with the backups last year. And I think I used enough backups. I'm not sure. I might have been short a backup or two. That they have regressed as badly as they have from one year to the next, where they looked like, hey, this passing game is a juggernaut. Let's figure out the run game to, they can't run, they can't pass. They use this bunched up condensed formation way more than they ever did last year. They use it on more than half their snaps. They're bottom 7 DVOA running and passing out of that, but they keep running it. Where, I guess, for you as a former player, as a coach, where for you is like, where should the line of demarcation have been?
Just man, to answer your question, the first question, I was surprised of the regression. I was not expecting what we have experienced on offense this year. I figured, you bring in Joe Mixon, that automatically makes your running game better. And then the offensive line, just all of a sudden, you can't pass block for whatever the reason. And to me, that falls in with the coaching. Because from year one to year two, it shouldn't be more confusion. It should be more cohesion. It should be more gelling. It should be more understanding the calls and the personnels and whoever I'm with as an offensive line. I should understand, who my guys are next to me and what the calls are and what to expect. But it seemed like it's just backwards. The passing game seemed off. The chemistry from CJ to the receivers just didn't seem there. The non-usage of Tank Dell was amazing to me. I mean, the kid was on pace for 1,000 yards last year. And then he was non-existent until Stephon Diggs started to get hurt. And I'm just, it's more frustrating than anything because I was expecting, I think we all were, a high-flying offense. Like a high-flying offense. If the offense was just what it was last year, which is way better to me than it was this year, I'll have more confidence going into the playoffs because the defense is playing at an extremely high level, in my opinion, right now. Even with the Jimmy Ward and Jenna Petrie, I still feel a little better than what I would right now. But the way the offense is going, it's like, man, you're not gonna do nothing. You scored 0 points on Netflix. I mean, it gets no bigger. Beyonce marched down the field more than you did. Like it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
65 million people saw them do jack and squat, and Jack left town.
And you were all. This is the frustrating part. You were all over the off season. I mean, you're traveling to China and talking. You're talked about on ESPN every other day. Like it was just so much going on, and I'm just like, man, this is very humbling for the Houston Texans. And I think they can learn from this, right? I think CJ in the offseason get back in the lab and like, no, let me get healthy. Let me focus on what I got to do and really improve. I think this will open up a lot of eyes as for this young football team as a whole. Like, hey, how do we handle the offseason? How do we truly get better? Because we did not live up to expectations. And we talked about it for months. Like, hey, you're not sneaking up on nobody this year. They're going to prepare for you. They're going to study you. They're going to know you're good. They're going to come after you. They're going to find you weak spots, and they're going to attack you. Now, you got to adjust. And the adjusting part is what messed up everything. There were no adjustments on the offensive side of the football. No adjustments. And there's still, to this day, no real adjustments that work. So if that's the case, you need to switch up what's going on offense. And again, I'm open to letting every single, I think I'm open to giving Bobby Slowick and staff, I'm open up whoever on the offensive line, whoever on the skill position side, like besides Joe Mixon, CJ, and Nico, hey, we got to figure it out.
Cecil, this season has been so bad. The Texans logo on my shirt is beginning to implode. As you see, it's kind of coming undone here. I'm with you. I don't believe Tank Dell will play next year. I would be absolutely stunned if the Texans even allowed him to attempt to play next year. He has no business playing next year. And the reality is we won't know what Tank Dell really could be until his second year back from that injury. So we're talking about 3 years.
Yep.
His rookie contract will be up before we really know what Tank is going to be again. And I think for that reason alone, the Texans have to look at this offseason and moving on from Tank Dell. Not that, hey, you got to cut him next year. He's going to be on IR. But the idea of you've got to build your offense with the anticipation Tank is no longer going to be a part of it. And in a year, when you get to 2026 or maybe later, you're evaluating what Tank is at that point and if he can still be a productive part of the team. And I hate it for him because, that is a really not just a good player, but a good-hearted person who has just got really awful breaks when it comes to the type and the severity of the injuries that he has gotten, from the broken ankle to being shot. to now just shredding his knee completely in a really fluky type of play where, all those bodies colliding together and he just happens to get hit in the right way that caused his knee to just turn inside out. And I want to thank you for sharing, your experience with that, because I'm sure it wasn't fun to go through that. I'm sure it's not easy to talk about that. And the road, how difficult that road was for you to try to come back from, because when you tear everything and you're a player who your livelihood is built on speed, precision, cuts, you're talking everything about what you do, what you excel at is in your knees. Yep. And he's going to face an extremely difficult road back because of that. Now, let me ask you from this point of view. Let's put on the GM hat. Stephon Diggs, who had been one of the iron horse receivers of this league, suffers a non-contact injury that ends his season. He seemed to like being here. At the same time, Bobby Slowick seemed to change the offense to, instead of, hey, let's get the ball to the open party and find the mismatch, it was, all right, on this play, we got to go to Nico. On this play, we got to go to Steph. On this play, we got to go to Nico. On this play, we got to go to Steph. Who's that tank guy? It seemed like it was more about kind of like when Oklahoma City had Paul George and Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook, and it was like they were just taking turns on who the offense was going to run through. I kind of felt like that's what their offense was like early. They were just taking turns between Nico and Steph of, hey, we've got to appease everybody, instead of let's find the guy who's open and appease everybody with winning. When Nico went down, they force-fed Steph a lot, and they had to figure out how to get Tank back involved because they had ignored him for a few weeks. When Steph went down and Nico wasn't back yet, then it became, okay, now we got to focus on Tank. Okay, get Tank the football. And we started to see the old Tank Dell come out. We started to see the production, the game breaker, the guy who made the big plays. And as Nico came back, Tank continued to play well. And then Tank got injured. That now brings us to where the Texans brought in Deontay Johnson, who probably did himself a favor trying to, get himself out of Carolina. Did not do himself any favors with how things went for him in Baltimore. This is essentially a game and a half audition for him, where he's going to probably run with the starters this week for however long that goes, whether that's a quarter or a half. And then he's going to play against his old team, the Steelers, and he should be highly motivated in that game. But this is a guy who is extremely talented and is coming off a situation that I think he will admit he did not handle to the best of his abilities. Where do you stand on Deontay Johnson? Is this a guy that you would consider bringing back?
I think honestly, last week, practice, all this week of practice, the Tennessee game, which I think he needs to play the full game, in my humble opinion, or most of the game, just to get established with the offense, the terminology, the route running. He didn't play that much at all in Baltimore. So the more he can play, the better, in my opinion. He's getting repetition of gain reps. Again, I'm assuming Tennessee will play their starters, so it'll be quality reps. And then whoever we have the Texans have the first round of the playoffs, that's his audition. That's really his audition. His character, honestly, is probably in question right now because of how he handled the situation in Baltimore, right? I understand wanting to get out of Carolina. I don't think nobody debates that. Like, I get it. It was a rough situation. You're getting closer to 30. When you get closer to 30, they start considering you old, right? If you're not, even if you are producing, you're starting to be considered an older guy. Start looking for younger guys. So he is on fit. And honestly, besides Nico, there's nobody else on the roster really pushing him. Robert Woods is who Robert Woods is. He's Mr. Reliable, but he's going to be, playing sparingly, right? Mechie's up and down. He doesn't play that much. We see flashes here and there, but nothing consistent, right? So if he comes in the next, say, the last 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of the season and plays well, practices well, gels with the teammates well, proves that he can fit in this culture, I'm holding on to him because he's a proven playmaker. Now, if he comes off in the next 3 or 4 weeks, because to me that's enough time to see, right, how he interacts with teammates. Because that's extremely important with the type of culture you're trying to build. If he comes in with a little ego, he comes in kind of thinking too highly of himself, I'm not even touching him. He can just, as the season ends, he can keep walking. We're not even going to be in contact with him. But if he shows some playmaking ability and shows he can be a good teammate, like I think he can, he is somebody I definitely would bring back to bolster this wide receiver room. Now, is he the only answer that I would bring back next year? No. I'm probably going to draft one. I'm probably going to look for a big name in free agency as well. If it's not Stephon Diggs, I'm not sure. I'm not against going against another big name in free agency, right? Garrett Wilson's name was popped out a couple weeks ago by different people. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is true, that they may try to get that and see what that bargain, make some phone calls, see what that price is like. But Deontay has a huge opportunity these next 2 or 3 weeks. If he can make some plays this week, make some plays next week, kind of get in good with CJ and the guys and get comfortable, he really can make an impression. I think we'll see him around next season.
Cecil, earlier you were talking about the offensive line and Laramie and Titus. And look, both of those guys are making a lot of money. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of them, the Texans found a way to move on from to free up some of that money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably easier to move the contract of Titus Howard than it is Laramie Tunsil. I also think the Texans still consider Laramie Tunsil a top left tackle, whereas I think it's a lot harder to replace a Laramie Tunsil than to replace a Titus Howard. They may already have the replacement for Titus Howard and Blake Fisher.
I agree.
But I could definitely see Titus Howard being chopped this offseason. I could see them parting ways with Shaq Mason, who I don't even know how to explain the drop-off in production for Shaq Mason this year. I don't know how to explain the fact that sometimes he is standing with nobody around him for 8 feet on either side, and he's just standing there looking around like, what should I do? Like he hasn't played in this league for 10 years. I think that the book is probably closed on Kenyon Green. And because of injuries and some less than stellar performance, I think Juice Scruggs is maybe being looked up as more as a backup emergency type guy than as a starter. And Jarrett Patterson, I think, has certainly outplayed him at the center position this year, both in terms of production and in terms of his ability to make the calls, make the reads, and get the rest of the line set up. That leaves you with, if we're going to say, hey, Blake Fisher is ready to take over at right tackle, that leaves you with 2 guard spots to fill. You can't draft both of them. And I think they're going to have to find ways. They might have to get a little creative in finding some guys for the interior of that offensive line, because the left guard and the right guard have given up more than half the sacks that CJ Stroud has taken this year.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, if you just turn on the film to the Packers game, if you turn on the film to the Minnesota game, you will see, if you turn on the Jets film, you will see so much pressure just from up the middle, from the names you mentioned, from Shaq, from Kenyon Green, from Juice Scruggs, from even a little bit of Jared Patterson, even though I agree with you that he's played better than Juice in different situations. But I think Juice and Patterson can make the team next year. However they play, what position they play, their role, I don't know. But I think you keep those two. I think Kenyon and I think Shaq are absolutely you have to move on from. I can't explain. I can't explain it. But I just think the production or the lack of production that we've seen from those two spots, it's just time to make a change. And I mean, it's only so much. You drafted a guy 15-year overall, and I get it. You drafted the first round pick, and they have to prove to you over and over and over again that they cannot be a good player. I think Kenyon has proven he cannot be a legit player in this system here with the Texans. Maybe he can go somewhere else and play. I'm hoping he can, but he's just not. He can't stay healthy, and when he is healthy, he's not playing well. And Shaq, I'm just confused. I'm not sure what you're doing. Again, I'm always going to go back to coaching, because to me, as a coach, it's your job to put your players in the best position to succeed. It's your job to put people in position to understand, to make it the situation not too confusing, to make the situation easy for the guy. Shaq played well last year. Why is he playing well this year? Well, what changed? You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, what? At times, the whole front five of the offensive line look confused. And as good as Laramie is, and I agree with you, you probably are not going to find a good enough deal, or you probably don't want to give up Laramie Tunsil because he is who he is at left tackle. But at right tackle, I mean, you might have to. I think you have to find a new right tackle, right? And Blake Fisher is your guy. You draft him second round. He's come in. He's played decently well. I think he's your guy. You spent, Pat, you spent so much money on the offensive line for it to do this, for CJ to be one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league this year. Like, that's just mind-boggling to me. So,
no, they put a lot of resources into the offensive line of, hey, we're going to protect our quarterback, and they're worse.
It's mind-boggling to me. Last year was like, oh, they pass block well, but the running game was so, and Devin Singletary did some decent things. You bring in Joe Mixon, he can do some things, and we saw flashes from Joe. Joe was the real deal. But Joe can't do nothing when he's getting hit as soon as he touched the football. He can't do nothing.
Like, he gets hit. He gets hit behind the line entirely too much.
Come on. Don't get me wrong. There's times where he breaks that tackle and get outside and does his thing, but you can't expect him to do that every single play or most of the game. Like, you have to help out. And to me, I don't want this to be a bash the offensive coaches podcast, but golly, bro. Like, I don't know what else to do. It literally comes down to making adjustments. It literally comes down to coaching better. It literally comes down to, how can I get the most out of my team? What do they do good? And can I put them in that situation? And you have not done that consistently throughout the year.
Yeah. See, and look, I think everybody who's followed this podcast for the last year knows that you are not a guy who's just going to throw coaches under the bus willy-nilly. I'm not saying I won't, but I know you won't. And the reality is every week, when the coaches come out and say, well, we just got to execute. If you haven't executed for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, at some point you have to accept, we cannot execute this. Right. Full stop. We cannot execute this, and stop trying to jam the square peg into the round hole.
Yep.
I always say the best coaches are the ones who are able to adapt to the strengths and weaknesses of their players and utilize their players to the best of their ability. And I feel like on defense, the Texans have done that. They did that with Jalen Petrie. They've done that with Jalen Bullock. They've done that with Henry To'oTo'o and Azeez Al-Shaair. They've done it with the rotation of the defensive tackles. They've done this recently with Sting, where they've had Sting following around the other team's best receiver. Like, go ahead, throw it to him. Watch what happens. He's going to get you twice. Ask Tyreek Hill. And they do this on defense. They have adapted their style of play on defense to take advantage of the skill sets of their best players. And on offense, there's like a steadfast refusal to do the same. Yeah. And this is where my only issue with DeMeco Ryans is, I get you're a defensive coach. I know the defense is your baby. But you've tolerated this for 17 weeks. Why? I don't want to hear Bobby's your boy. I don't want to hear, well, I'm a defensive guy. I don't want to hear any. You are the head coach. It starts and ends with you. You have allowed this circus to go on with your offense when you have, coming into this season, one of the best young quarterbacks the league has ever seen. You improved your running back room. You improved your wide receiver room. And your offense has been a wreck half the season. And I want to know why this has been allowed to continue. Why has there not been a mandate from the head coach to the offensive coordinator? Hey, stupid, this doesn't work. Stop doing it. Stop running these condensed formations. We stink at that. Stop running these screen plays where you have a guy come in motion and bring another defender right to where I'm throwing the ball. Use that guy to get somebody out of there. Why are you putting more defenders where I'm trying to get a guy to make someone miss? Because I will never understand that. The play calling, the play designs, half the time they don't make any damn sense. And there has been nothing from the head coach of, I mean, at some point, maybe you just got to go full, Leroy Gibbs and just back of the head. What the hell's wrong with you? I don't understand why this has been allowed to go on. And that is my only gripe with DeMeco Ryans is he seemingly has empowered Bobby Slowick with an unchecked power over the offense. And Slowick doesn't know how to use it this year. And he hasn't tried to rein him in, direct him, reset him. He's allowed Bobby to continue this Mad Hatter style offense of we're going to do it come hell or high water. We're going to do it my way, and I don't give a damn. We're going to do it my way. And it's not working out.
It's interesting because you look at the defense, and coming into the year, I'm like, man, the secondary worries me a little bit. You got Kamari Lassiter, who's had a good training camp, a good preseason, but he hasn't really played NFL ball. You got Kalen Bullock. We'll see how he goes along. Good preseason, but he hasn't played a lot of ball. They developed over time. They developed, and they were put, like you mentioned, you said it perfectly. They put them in situations where they developed over time, and eventually they were who they are today. And their trajectory is they're going to be really, really, really good players one day, it seems like. And I think DeMeco has his hand in on a lot of that, right? Obviously, he's a defensive-minded coach. But when you look at the offensive side of the ball, I feel like when it comes to when you have a young offensive coordinator, he needs some type of mentorship, right? So if you have a young OC and you have an offensive-minded head coach, well, that head coach can be the mentor to that OC, right? He can be there for him. Hey, we got to do this. We got to change this. We got to, hey, look for this blitz. Or we got to switch this whole thing up. Or like you mentioned, hey, what the heck you doing? Like, stop doing that stupid stuff. Like, you can figure it out. But when the OC is surrounded by other people that haven't necessarily called plays in the league before, like, to me, that's the mistake that DeMeco made. Like, he didn't surround Bobby with a bunch of veteran coaches that have been around the league for 25, 30 years, or that have called plays before, or that have been, like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to really, if you have a young coordinator, you have to really set him up to succeed. So somebody that if you can't do as a head coach, somebody else can really push him and mentor him and be there for him. I feel like that's where I got to disconnect with DeMeco. I'm like, if you look at the defense side of the ball, your defensive coordinator has you. Your D coordinator has you. And honestly, I know the dynamic, right? I think DeMeco's calling the plays or doing the stuff mostly, but your defensive coordinator has you. You're the mentor for the defensive coordinator. Who is that guy for Bobby Slowick? Gerard Johnson? He's younger. He's and who says he's listening to him, right? This is the running back coach, is the offensive line coach, but the offensive line coach is struggling because his guys aren't playing well. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you don't have another guy in that building as far as the offense side of the ball that has called plays before at a high level. DeMeco has called a defense before. He's one of the best defenses in the league in San Francisco. So to me, that's where I'm like, okay, that's the mistake that was made. Now coming into the offseason, what are you going to do to fix that? When you get rid of him, who are you going to bring in? Right? And when you bring him in, is he going to be a younger guy? Is he going to be a guy with experience? How can you surround him with the proper pieces to set him up for success?
I think they need a more veteran, more proven offensive play caller. Maybe somebody who's already had the taste of being a head coach, success or failure or whatnot, but kind of knows what they're best at is being an offensive coordinator.
Yep.
And you can find, young coaches to fill around him that are going to learn from that guy and be able to be the next generation. But I think you need somebody, because like I said, it seems like with D'Amico, there's the defense and then there's the offense. And D'Amico is all about the defense, and the offense is kind of its own separately run entity. And if you're going to have that structure, look, that structure has worked for many, many coaches over the years, right? Bill Parcells didn't tell Ron Earhart how to call the offense. Mm-hmm. If you can find the kind of veteran coach that you can trust to build and run an offense and an offensive staff, then you can kind of have that separate but equal offense and defense, and then it all comes together under D'Amico, even though he's kind of letting the offense run basically autonomously, because that kind of seems how it goes.
No,
and again, right. It worked a year ago because they spread offenses wide and they let CJ do his thing, and this year they don't want to spread defenses wide for reasons that none of us will ever understand.
I'm with you on that, brother. It's going to be interesting what happens with that, because there's some names around. I'm excited for Black Monday because there are going to be some names that I think I just want to see. But there's some names in my mind. I'm like, okay, is Dayball going to be available? You know what I mean? Is he's the guy that, to me, that can call a good offense. Is some other guys out there? You know what I mean?
I think Brian Daboll is going to be available. I think Doug Peterson's going to be available. Doug Peterson's the guy who developed Carson Wentz before Carson Wentz broke apart.
Peterson's a good one.
He's also a guy who won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, or BDN as we call him, lovingly. But the idea of there are going to be head coaches who are offensive coaches who are going to lose their jobs for whatever reasons, and a lot of those reasons are going to be their GM sucked. Looking at you, Brian Daboll, looking at you, Doug Peterson, your GMs sucked. So it is, there are going to be some coaches who are going to be available. We're seeing right now in Washington, Cliff Kingsbury, who, ran his course in Arizona, didn't work out, goes to Washington, and Jaden Daniels should win Rookie of the Year, hands down. And honestly, I don't know why he's not getting more attention for MVP, because that was a 4-win team a year ago. They were an absolute joke. And now they've got double-digit wins, and they're in the postseason. And that guy has not 1, not 2, let me go full LeBron James, not 3, 4. 4 games where he has led a game-winning touchdown with 30 seconds or less to go in the fourth quarter.
On big stages, too. Mm-hmm.
I mean, 4 times under a minute to go, you have thrown a game-winning touchdown. That kid is straight ice. And he is everything that franchise desperately needed. Mm-hmm. They were in 4 games without him. If you want to talk about a guy he's got more total yardage, I think, than anybody but Lamar Jackson. And he's racked up the touchdowns, and he's racked up the wins, and he's made his team respectable. They were a joke. He's made them good. Nobody's done it, from the bottom and had to come up as far as Jaden Daniels this year.
No, you're right, because the most that we were talking about the Commanders with all the offseason mess with the the name change and the owner being crazy and all his allegations. So you're absolutely right. That's a special kid, man. But man, you mentioned Doug Peterson. I think he'll be good. I think he will be really good.
Just let him run the offense. That's all. Just run the offense. Have a good time.
And like you mentioned, the autonomy of how the offense is being, like how he lets the offense do what the offense does. Talking about D'Amico. Like Doug could be the head coach of the offense. That'll be perfect for him. That's his wheelhouse, right? And he could really truly develop that offense and develop CJ and get things going. Man, that could be him or Brian Daboll. I think would be good. But it'll be interesting to see what names on Black Monday, this upcoming Monday. Interesting to see what names start falling.
You bring in a guy like that. It's like, look, give me 2 years, develop my quarterback, and develop your replacement.
Yep.
And after 2 years, go get yourself the head coaching job you want.
Yep.
I don't know if they had that agreement with Kingsbury in Washington where they said, give us 2 years. But Kingsbury is going to be a hot name for a head coach because of what they did with Jay Daniels this year.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Ben Johnson's going to get to pick whatever job he wants because he stayed in Detroit not once but twice.
Yeah, he did. That was smart.
He stayed there. And you know what? You see what's going on in Chicago? So according to various reports, Ben Johnson wants to be the head coach in Chicago.
Okay.
But he also wants to choose who his GM is going to be and choose all his staff. And for some reason, the Bears might let Ryan Poles pick another head coach because he hasn't destroyed that franchise enough. And Poles doesn't want to bring in Ben Johnson because, Ben Johnson doesn't want him to be the GM. He wants to bring in somebody else. So, the reports say that Poles is looking at, say, like Brian Flores because he's got a relationship with Flores, who I got to tell you, I'm going to be surprised if Flores ever gets another head coaching job. It's tough to sue the league and then get another head coaching job. So I'll be surprised if Brian Flores, I think he'll get DC jobs, and he's damn good DC. But I'd be surprised if he got another head coaching opportunity. And the idea of them letting, again, we're talking about, situations, bad GMs. How long are you going to stick with a bad GM? I think some teams, for whatever reason, the owners, they let the GMs just blame everybody else and badmouth everybody else and basically go into job protection mode, and they buy this nonsense. And I guess because they're around the GM more than they're around the coach, certainly more than they're around the players. But it doesn't take a genius to figure out these rosters are poorly constructed. They lack depth. They don't have the positional flexibility that they need for a lot of these things. They don't have that flexibility with different positions. They don't have the depth at different positions. And there's only one guy to blame for that. And that's the guy who constructed the roster. That's not the head coach. So I am very interested to see what happens on Black Monday, just like you, Cecil, because I don't think there will just be head coaches out of work. I think there's going to be general managers out of work, if not Monday, very shortly thereafter. And I hope that when the time comes, the Texans find a veteran offensive coach who has developed another quarterback previously that you can trust to come in here and have a good relationship with your quarterback, because what they have done to the Texans offense, what they have done to CJ Stroud this year is franchise malpractice.
Yeah, it's criminal. It's legit criminal of how things should not be done. So hopefully this offseason they can figure things out, and we'll see how it goes. But again, I'll be honest with you. I think at best you'll win one playoff game, hopefully. And then second round, you got to see what, Buffalo or
Kansas City.
Second
round, you're going to see Kansas City. You're the 4. You're going to play the 1.
Like that's going to be tough. So
yeah. If you was the 4, you've got to play the 1. Yeah,
right.
You're going to get the damn Chiefs. And
Chiefs in Arrowhead.
We know how that's going to go. It's not going to go as well as it did the last time they lost. It's going to be a lot uglier because in the postseason, that's where the Chiefs throw that switch and they decide to play. And we saw this, right? We just listened to the last game where Kansas City decided, okay, we're going to play. And here's Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball around the yard. And here's Travis Kelce looking like, I don't know, Travis Kelce. All of a sudden, the Chiefs look like the Chiefs when they need to.
It was incredible. Oh, was Patrick Mahomes going to play? Is he not going to play? He hurt his ankle, sprained his ankle pretty bad, and then he's running for touchdowns. I'm like, what in the world?
Patrick Mahomes is the Wolverine. No matter how badly he's hurt, he goes to bed, he wakes up, he's fine. I don't know how to say. He goes to bed, he wakes up, he's fine. He is indestructible. It is incredible how every time we see Patrick Mahomes is hurt, he doesn't look hurt.
Random thought for you. Has your thoughts changed about Josh Allen?
I will say that I went and did some looking up of numbers. And Josh Allen's numbers certainly got a lot better once that team decided to go get Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper has not been the big-time performer for them.
Yeah.
But because he's Amari Cooper and his name and reputation, defenses must account for him.
Yeah.
So while they are accounting for him, their first-round draft pick, Keon Coleman, has been eating. And it is, look, it's very clear when you pull up the numbers from when they traded for Amari Cooper, before and after. Josh Allen's numbers are way better after. His rushing numbers are much better. He's got 8 of his 11 touchdowns on the ground since they got Amari Cooper. Why? Because you have to account for Amari Cooper in the red zone. Even if he's not getting the ball, you have to account for him. And that has allowed the Bills to spread defenses wide. And then Josh Allen's a big enough dude. He goes right up the middle on a sneak. They can't stop him for a yard. He's going to get that 1-yard touchdown. I think Josh Allen has had a couple of games that were really impressive. I thought he had a terrific 6-touchdown game that he capped off with one of the most boneheaded decisions that cost them that game. But then he learned from that the next game, and he played very well, and they got a win. They got a big win. So I do think that there's some situational awareness with Allen where late in the game, they needed to call that timeout. They didn't. And then they ran it, right? They kept the ball in play, and that cost them 17 seconds, and it ultimately cost them a game. And you might be able to put that on the head coach. But again, as the quarterback in that situation, sometimes you got to be able to tell your head coach, we need a timeout.
Facts.
The best quarterbacks, if their coach is having a brain fart, the quarterback takes over. And I think that is maybe the last step for Josh Allen, is knowing when to take over from the coach. I think Josh Allen grew as a player this year a lot because he had to. They took away his safety blankets. They took away Stephon Diggs. They took away Gabe Davis. They made him utilize other targets that early in the season, sometimes they came through and sometimes they didn't. I thought the game against the Texans where he went 9 of 30 because, they didn't have a receiver worth a damn, at least not at that point in the season, opened their eyes. Hey, we really need to do something at wide receiver. And less than 2 weeks later, they acquired Amari Cooper. I think that was I really think the Texans game was a turning point for the Bills. They realized they did not give Josh Allen enough weapons. And once Josh Allen had the weapons, he maximized not just their ability, but his own ability. And yeah, you know what? I think Josh Allen absolutely stepped forward. Is he a top 3 quarterback? I don't think he's a top 3 quarterback because I think the top 3 quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson.
Agreed.
And damn if anybody's going to tell me otherwise. Is he in the next 3? Yeah, he probably is. Yeah, he probably is. And like I said, he absolutely grew as a quarterback, stepped forward, and once they acquired Amari Cooper, he really stepped forward and he's put that team. He's really given his team the best chance to win almost every single time out.
Okay.
So So has there been a change of heart on Josh Allen? Yeah, there has a little bit. You know what? He earned it. He earned it. And I'm going to give him the credit that he deserved because he earned it. And smart for the Bills to recognize we need to give our quarterback more to work with. But when they did, he made them look like geniuses.
Yeah, he did. He did.
And he did it without leaning on Amari 13, 14 targets a game.
Very true. Kudos to you, man. Kudos to you giving him props.
I'm not so arrogant. I can't admit. Look, when a guy plays really well, he plays really well. Yeah. His history to that point was if he didn't have a star receiver, he couldn't do anything. Well, you know what? This year he showed them he could, but that was only going to get them so far in a league where you have to score. And then they gave him another weapon, and he turned the offense up 5 notches. And that's a credit to him. So, yeah, you know what? He does. He absolutely deserves that credit. There are some quarterbacks. I mean, Jared Goff is having a tremendous season. Jaden Daniels is turned the league upside down. Bo Nix started the season off terrible and really came on strong the second half of the year. There's a lot of young quarterbacks that are starting to make their way up. I think that Bryce Young has started to find himself late in the season, despite being on an awful football team. He has started to remember who the hell he is, And he has shown you some flashes of this is the reason why this guy was a number 1 overall pick. And I would not be writing Bryce Young off anytime soon. That kid's got talent. He's a hell of a football player. He's been a hell of a college player. And if they just give him anything on offense at all, he's going to do something. I don't know if I trust that franchise to pull their heads out of their posteriors. But if they can, Bryce Young is going to make them look really smart. I think Caleb Williams is going to be better than he's looked this year. And it's a weird thing because remember at the beginning of the season, all talk was about how Caleb Williams is going to come in to the best situation a rookie quarterback has ever had. And it hasn't quite worked out that way. And there were some growing up moments for Caleb that we thought there were going to be, particularly the body language and the emotional stuff. You know, when he's slumped over on the bench, like just sulking.
I hate that. Oh
man, that you can't lead a team of grown men and you're doing that kind of nonsense. I think there was a lot of teachable moments for him in that regard, but you can't deny the physical talent and the ability that he has. And I think that with a new GM and new head coach, if Ben Johnson's their head coach next year, Caleb Williams is going to look like a star because he's going to know how to maximize his abilities.
Yeah.
They got to get the right coach. Yeah. And to think that they had all the opportunities to get the right coach and they hired the guy out of Seattle and everybody in Seattle's like, you hired that guy? What the hell's wrong with you? Why would you hire him? He's terrible. And you could have had a half a dozen other offensive coaches who are all having tremendous seasons, including Cliff Kingsbury, who, was only his, you passed on Kingsbury for him, right? So I think that he's another guy who, right situation, right coach, will flourish. And one of the things we've seen in the NFL this year, right, is second chance quarterbacks, right? Your Geno Smiths, your Baker Mayfields, your Sam Darnolds, these guys who once upon a time were written off as busts, high draft picks. I mean, Geno was a second-round pick, but Baker was a number 1 overall pick. Darnold was a high pick. These guys were written off at busts because they played for bad franchises. And now that they're in situations where they have good coaching and a good, solid setup, these guys are flourishing. And I don't think that's an accident. Coaching in the NFL more than any other sport matters the most. And it's, I will say that before you spend a lot of time around the NFL, you hear that and you're like, oh, that's just like league talk, coach talk type of stuff. The more time you spend around the NFL, the more you realize how important coaching is, especially at the quarterback position. It is more important than in any other sport. Coaching in the NFL, particularly at the quarterback position, because it makes or breaks your franchise. And it's that one guy, because that guy's everything. In baseball, you got 5-6 starters. So you might have 1 or 2 guys who are really good, 1 or 2 guys who aren't quite as good, but you're not sending the same guy out there every game. In the NFL, same guy goes out there every game. In the NBA, there's a lot of just pure natural talent that takes over. There's only so many set plays teams run. And most of them are essentially the same type of the same 3 to 4 foundational type sets. The NFL, more than anything else, that coaching matters. And you see it at the quarterback position. And Baker and Sam and Geno are prime examples of what happens when you get a guy who has talent and you get him out of a bad situation into a good situation.
Yep. Totally.
I don't know if that's going to help Daniel Jones any, but it certainly helped those 3 guys. And when you have a guy like a CJ Stroud, who is enormously talented and a very cerebral player, and you get him with a coach or a coaching staff on offense that knows how to maximize his talent, has a more proper blocking scheme and a way to maximize the other players on that offense, how to maximize Nico, how to maximize Dalton Schultz if he's still here, how to get the ball into Joe Mixon's hands, in one-on-one situations a little more often. I think we will see a much different CJ Stroud, who will look a lot more like last year's CJ Stroud than this year's CJ Stroud in terms of being able to make those fast reads. I said, one of the things about CJ Stroud, people say, well, why isn't he making the explosive plays as often as he did? I said, well, number one, he's always running for his life. And number two, he runs for his life so much that when he's escaping the pocket, he's not able to just look downfield the way that he did as a rookie. I mean, you remember his rookie season, he was always looking downfield. Mm-hmm. He's got to look for where the defender is who's trying to rip his head off because he doesn't have the time to, have all that. I'm just going to look down the field. He can't just look down the field because he knows he's going to get killed if he does. So therefore, he's not seeing the plays develop as quickly or as early because he's got to have one eye right here. Therefore, you can't have all your eyes down the field to see who's open, who's breaking out, where a guy is going. And he misses things because he doesn't have as much time to look. Okay, rant over.
No, you're good, brother. You're good. You are good. Makes total sense, man. So we'll see. We'll see what happens this offseason, and we'll see how the Texans finish up the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, on a positive note. Hopefully, it can go a little longer in the playoffs, but we'll see how it goes.
I'm kind of checked out on the Texans right now, and it sucks because I don't want to be checked out on the Texans. I love football. I do not want to be checked out on the Texans, but this game means nothing against the fake Oilers. This game means nothing. Nope. Only thing I need here is nobody suffer any kind of crazy injury.
Yep.
All right, and then are they going to beat, say, the Steelers? I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 game, mainly because the Steelers are just as big a mess as the Texans are right now. If you heard the comments among some of the defensive players, including TJ Watt, they kind of lend to the idea that there is at least one person among the starters on the defense who's not pulling their weight. And they're not naming, obviously, but comments from him, from Cam Hayward, like there was a lot of veterans who basically talked about, hey, you got 10 guys going one direction and one guy going the other direction, and it's breaking us. And that's a big issue. The offense has been okay with Russell Wilson. I mean, he's certainly been better this year than he has in any of those years in Denver. Mm-hmm. But there's obviously limitations to an older Russell Wilson. And that offense, just the way that it's structured. And it's kind of amazing that Mike Tomlin, doesn't seem to matter who the quarterback is. Mike Tomlin keeps that team winning. And something
about him. He just finds a way to win. But it doesn't mean he'll win championships, but he finds ways to win in the league.
And shout out to Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk, who clearly wants to destroy Mike Tomlin's legacy and maybe get him fired for suggesting that the Steelers should move on from both Fields and Wilson this year and bring in Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, that won't work.
Like, why would you wish that on anybody? Why would you wish that evil on anybody?
Don't do that.
And why Mike Tomlin? What did Mike Tomlin ever do to you, Mike Florio, that you would hate him so much? You're going to stick Aaron Rodgers on him? That is cruel and unusual punishment, and I'm pretty sure that's outlawed in this country. That being said, I am very interested to see how they play in that wild card game against the Steelers. And look, the last time the Steelers were in town, the building was probably 50-60% Steelers fans. Steelers travel very well. I am interested to see for a playoff game how big the Steelers fan presence is at NRG, because they will have one.
Yeah, they travel well.
And what? How does that game go out? How does two franchises that started off the season well and are sputtering here at the end? How does that game play out? Because I don't think it matters who wins. I don't think either one of them have a prayer in hell against Kansas City Chiefs. And the next most important move for me is Bobby Slowick fired.
There you go.
That's it. And I don't enjoy calling for someone's job. I certainly wouldn't enjoy someone calling for my job. That would kind of suck. But the reality is he has done as poor a job. This is between the Texans and the 49ers, the two most underperforming offenses of the NFL this year.
Yeah.
Two teams that had high expectations and have absolutely just vomited all over themselves. It's the Texans and the 49ers. And when the expectations are high and you don't just under-deliver, you fall in a ditch, and usually costs you your job.
Yeah.
All right. If I came into, Sports Radio 610, and let's say, we're doing a 2-share, and the expectations is I'm going to do a 4-share, and I do a 0-1, I'm going to get fired. Fortunately, I'm not doing a 0-1. We're doing pretty well. We did a 5-1 in our primary demo and a 7-1 in our expanded demo. So very proud of the show that Sean Bajani and I have done on Sports Radio 610. One that you have been a guest on, and we hope to have you on more often. But that will do it for this edition of the Believe in Texans podcast as we get ready for the Texans to wrap up the season against the fake Oilers in Tennessee. He is a former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran Cecil Shorts III. Always appreciate the time that he gives us. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home of the Houston Texans. Looking to see how this season ends, then we'll get you with a preview as they go into Wild Card weekend. Until then, let's go Texans.